Hi, Amber. You've been waiting patiently there. I think you have a question for Tom.
Yes, I do. Hi, Tom.
Hello, Amber.
I wanted to say, Nicholas, I experienced the same thing with the eyesight thing at a stressful time. I was getting my master's degree, and I was just going and staring at the computer a lot, and I didn't like what I was doing to boot, and half of my vision kind of went away. I had to get someone to come pick me up and everything, and it was scary, but it was definitely stress. Tom, my question is about masculinity and feminine, and you talk about the intellect and the being level working together to optimize growth. And I was wondering if you could talk about the essence of masculine and femininity and how they work together in optimization and what that might look like in like the family dynamic, the workplace, our government, and in our society when it's healthy, because we see a lot of dissonance going on. So I was wondering if you could talk about what it looks like when it's healthy.
Well, that's a question that would take me at least 4 or 5 hours to answer. That's a very big question. Although I am writing a book pretty much on that subject, and I've got a very bare skeleton, kind of sketchy outline of it on my website. If you go to my website, MBT, www.mybigtoe.com, and look for downloads. I think there's a tab that says downloads, and inside that you'll see things that are, you'll see gems, and you'll see a couple other things, but you get down, you'll see the book, Primal Male, Primal Female. And there's about 20 pages there that outline what male and female is at the very basic fundamentals. Take away the cultural overlays and just, what does gender mean? And it's not much. It's maybe a 5%, of the concepts that are going to be in this book I'm going to write. And I've been writing this now for a decade or two. But that's just what do you call it in a movie? A trailer? It just gives you a little glimpse inside of what it's maybe about. So that's kind of a trailer, if you will. But it gives you some of the logic of what you're asking about. And it's 20 pages, and I obviously can't do 20 pages here to answer your question. But I can say, when you say, what does it look like when it's healthy? When it's healthy, when we do not have, fear and ego dominating our relationships, the male and female connection or relationship is great. It's fantastic. They work with each other perfectly. They are designed to work together as a team, a part of one whole thing. And the male-female dynamic, when it's not neurotic, is a very powerful and very loving, caring, beautiful thing. So yes, there is a healthy relationship, between the genders. It isn't really, gender war. It's gender love and gender peace. If the two people involved do not have all the fear, ego, and beliefs, that is what makes it not work well. So it's a matter of growing up. So you can enhance your ability to be part of that relationship just by growing yourself up. That's, again, comes back to, that's always the main thing that you should do, right? No matter what, you grow yourself up. So that helps a lot. But the two work very well together. They're not naturally competitive. They're naturally helpful to each other. They naturally fit together, like I say, as a team. It's almost like two parts of a whole thing. When they fit together, it's very, very good. And I have some exercises, and I talk about some of those in this paper I wrote, that be a good way to kind of work on attaining that if you're in a relationship with somebody. And I say, well, here's what the guy should do, and here's what the girl can do, and they can kind of work this out and see how that works for them. So if you go look at that, you'll find a little some exercises, if you will, some ways to help develop that in your relationship. But the problems that we have now is that our concepts, our understanding of gender is probably more dysfunctional than it's ever been. Our understanding of gender has gotten so far away from what's natural and fundamental that we don't know what it means. Most men and women don't really know what it means to be a man or be a woman. We've kind of lost touch with what is that? What does that mean? What's the essence of being female? What's the essence of being male? And we are kind of lost. You go back 1,000 years and basically the males and females knew exactly, what that meant, but not so much today. We have, our intellects have so gotten in charge of trying to define gender and relationship that we've worked ourselves into gender war more than we have into anything else. We've worked ourselves into a competition between male and female, and none of that is particularly natural. Now, we do have to make some fundamental changes in our culture to allow females to be female and men to be men. We now have a very skewed idea of that. So when women go into the workplace, they're expected to act like men. It was a male workplace before that. Now there's a lot of females in the workplace, but they all are supposed to act like men. They need to fill the roles just like the men filled them when they were in that workplace. So we don't value at the workplace, we don't value the feminine side of things. We don't value the contribution that females bring. We just look at the contribution we expected before, and we want to just keep that the same. So there's a whole thing missing there, and vice versa when it comes to males and what's expected of them. It's very different now, and it's in transition. You see, for almost all of the history of humans, I guess if you're really looking at very distinct humans, it's 200,000 or 300,000 years. If you're looking at even human ancestors, it maybe goes back 1,000,000 or so years. But for the times that humans have been walking around, the environment has been a very violent, unfriendly space. Been an extremely tough place. We have grown up. We've gotten kinder and gentler in time. We are actually succeeding in growing the quality of our consciousness. But we're to a point now where we don't have nearly as strict a division of labor and division of process that we had in our past. So we have to change our attitudes. Our social understanding of gender needs to change. And change is always tumultuous. Change always has a lot of things going on in it that are dysfunctional. When we changed from the agrarian revolution, where we became farmers, to the industrial revolution, where we became industrialists, there was a lot of dysfunction that happened throughout that change. A lot of difficulty of people trying to adapt to a new way of being. Well, it's like that in a more subtle and a more fundamental way with gender. We have succeeded in being kinder and gentler to each other. It's not as scary a place as it used to be. Our species is not in danger of becoming extinct. Our population isn't small. And all of those things have created a new space for us to interact in. And we are in the change. We're in the process of changing something that has been at our core for 200,000 years, and now in the last 2 centuries, 3 centuries, we've gone through, maybe more than that, maybe even 4 centuries, we've been going through this changing in the way that we interact with each other between male and female. And that just has to take some time before it works itself out. So that's kind of I'm giving you a very broad, kind of short answer, that there is a lot to talk about there. And it is a long story, but read that little 20-page thing I have. That'll get you kind of focused on some of the basic logic. And other than that, as far as your own personal life goes, just grow yourself up, have relationships, enjoy relationships, don't be judgmental, ask what you can give, not what you can get. It's all about love is a thing. It only takes one to love. Love is given away. It's given away at no cost. When you love, it's something you give. If it's not love, then it generally doesn't work real well in the long term. If it's a deal, well, I'll do this for you if you do that for me. If it's a negotiation, that's not love. All love is unconditional. If it's conditional, it's not love. It's an arrangement. And arrangements work for a while, but they tend to grow old and not really work well anymore. You know, arrangements aren't always long-lived. So, yeah, there's a lot to change here, a lot for us to grow up. This is an area that is very significant in that it contributes probably more, or at least as much, to the dysfunction, to our fear and to our angst, to our ego, than any other area in our life. And it is a very important thing to consider. That's why I've been writing this book for a long time, because I think it's something that is really ready, something we need, that we're getting ready for. I'm not sure we're ready for it just yet, which is part of the reason I guess I've been dragging my feet with it. I'm not sure that the time's quite ready yet. The people are willing to can see outside of the box that they have them trapped in, the gender box they've trapped themselves in. So I don't know if that helps or not, but there's a lot to talk about there and a lot to think about. That's a very big question. But you see, love, there's another question. I was looking through some of the questions, and one of them was asking about an open relationship. And love is always open. It's unconditional. You see, love is something given. It's not a deal. Deal is something else. Doesn't mean that deals are bad. I mean, we make business deals, and I guess we make relationship deals. Business deals work some of the time. Usually they have dates on them. They run out, after a certain time, the deal's over. They understand that deals don't go on forever, and they typically renegotiate after a certain period. The contract's over. Contracts all have an ending. But in any case, in a relationship, deals work some, but it's not long term. They don't really have good long term outcomes. So if it's love, it's unconditional. Doesn't matter. It's not, if you do this, I'll love you, and if you don't do that, I won't. Love is given away, and it's never taken back. But sometimes there's people you just can't live with. Now, has to be earned. Trust has to be earned. Somebody has to earn your trust by being trustworthy in their interactions with you. They have to earn your like by being likable when they interact with you. But there are people that you can love and you don't like them and you don't trust them, either one, but you still love them. That's the nature of love.
Well, thank you, Tom. There was a lot there. And I think when you first put out that little write-up that you did about your book, I did approach it, and I couldn't wait to get to the part where you were going to say all the things that you had to say. I knew you were going there, but with the programs, being a female in a male-dominated society, to hear the programs that I kind of encounter, those hardwired programs about what a woman is, to be reading that, and it's painful sometimes to slam up against that, I guess, in society. And I thought, well, I'll read this later. And I did skim over it, and I've probably watched all of your videos. I first came across your work in 2010. More recently, there's been an influx of videos, so I have some catching up to do. But I see that with the last chat, someone had asked a question about, what's going on with what was going on in Hollywood, and you sort of recoiled at that because, I mean, it's Hollywood, and that's a stretch of anyone's imagination to imagine Tom Campbell really involved in caring about what's going on in Hollywood. But there's just all these sexual harassment and sexual assault things just popping up everywhere. And that is one of the things that sparked, my question, because it is a result of people looking at each other through the lens of those programs, causing all this dissonance. And as the world begins to change, I just wonder what it might look like in the workplace, and particularly in the government, because the solution, of course, isn't to separate or to, not work together. We have to work together. So I don't know exactly what it would look like, but it's interesting to think about. So I appreciate your answer very much.
Well, to say a little more then to you about that, in the workplace today, like I say, we expect the females in the workplace, at least the workplace I'm used to. I'm used to a technical workplace for the most part. That's where I don't work in a bank. I work in physics and engineering and that sort of thing. And in the workplace, we tend to expect females to act like men. We even like it better if they look like men. They put their hair up, they wear suits. They tend to de-emphasize their femininity to get along in the workplace. You see, that's not the way it needs to be. The feminine needs to be valuable in the workplace, because the feminine viewpoint is just a very different viewpoint. The way females process data, the results they come to, the things they take into account, the way they look at the world, what's important to them, all of that is very different than the male viewpoint. And both viewpoints are useful. Both viewpoints have value. Both viewpoints are work together to make a better product, a better whatever it is in your business world you do, whether you make products or services or whatever. It's better if you can take both of those viewpoints and work with them together, as opposed to have it all unidimensional, all have one viewpoint or the other. Again, it gets back to diversity. Diversity is a good thing. To have everybody in your office have the same viewpoint means that you'll never be very creative. You'll never come up with a lot of solutions that you could otherwise. There's a lot of things that you just won't see because everybody has the same viewpoint. That's not good as far as innovation, creativity, or even just doing a good job. So the fact that the male and females live in different worlds, see the world differently, process data differently, gives the combination of both an advantage. But see, we're not taking advantage of that. We bring the females into the workplace and want them to pretend that they're men. And that is losing the feminine input that they could have in that workplace. And yes, even in a technical workplace, that's true. Even when the workplace is full of engineers, that's true. There's a feminine viewpoint to that engineering as well, and to the problem, because engineering solutions are solutions for people. There's people connection things. How is this going to affect, how is this engineering result going to affect families? How's it going to affect children? How's it going to affect, the users, and who are the users, and how do they feel about things? And to have a female's perspective on that, you'll make a better product. So we don't appreciate that. But like I said in the beginning, we're in a time of change where the gender roles are modifying away from what they have been through all of our existence as a species. Like the 99% of our existence of a species, it's been one way, and now it's different. And we've got all of these instincts that are from that, the last 200,000 years worth of instincts in both of us, males and females. And now our environment's changed. So we have to, one, accept those instincts and not try to not try to deny them, because when you deny something that's fundamental to you, that's instinctual, you'll just make yourself neurotic. You need to work with those instincts, and you need to work with them and adapt them to the new environment. And eventually those instincts will change. But instincts don't change on a dime, it takes a while. So this transition is going to take a little while. But instincts don't have to take 100,000 years to change either. Instincts can change in probably, as little as 4 or 5 generations. We can change instincts, but we have to, it's just, if we actually knew what we were doing and made a concerted effort to do it, we could change instincts rather quickly. But we just kind of, wander around haphazardly, clueless as to what we're doing and why we're doing it. That's why it takes so long for instincts to change, because we don't focus on it. We don't have our intent on it. So yes, the workplace would be very different. Females would be valued by the viewpoint that they bring to the problem. Whether they're female engineers or nurses, it doesn't matter. It's the viewpoint they bring to the problem is different than the male viewpoint. And together, they'll always produce something that's better than they will if they're all, if everybody thinks like a nurse, or everybody, like a female nurse, or everybody thinks like a male engineer. That makes the nursing and the engineering poorer for both of those. It's a time of change. Time of change is always full of pain and agony, because change is difficult. We are one way and we need to be a different way. And that's a struggle. And most of us struggle against change. So if we're in a situation and it doesn't feel right to us, well, we push back. We don't like change. That wants us to act differently. That's kind of the ego's viewpoint. No, it's me. What about me? I want it this way. This is the way it needs to be. You need to change to suit me. So that's an ego talking, and that's why it takes so long for us to get through the change, because we have all this ego and fear. So get rid of your ego and fear. Stay skeptical. Try to enjoy life as much as you can, and realize that a lot of this is just the way it is. It's just instincts that are trying to evolve now in a different environment than we've had before, and that process takes time. And it isn't that it's mean-spirited, it's just that it's the way it is, and it's going to take a little time for us to change. So don't feel that people who don't get it are really mean-spirited and are kind of negative people. They're just struggling with things themselves, and they have their own ego and their own fear that they're trying to deal with. And it's a slow process to go through fundamental change. And this change is about as fundamental as it gets.
Thank you, Tom.
Tom, the open relationship question you referred to there was one of Titi's, but I believe you answered that. I'm going to ask you a question from the MBT forum user Nessie on your PMR travels. Throughout your PMR travels, Tom, what have you encountered that has gladdened your heart? Do you have any particular joys in this life packet, and has anything really surprised you? I like that question. That's a good one.
That's a hard one to answer, though. Well, I could say that there was a lot that surprised me. There was a whole lot of things that I didn't understand, and it was always a surprise to realize, oh, that's the way it works. I didn't understand that. I didn't realize that. So I had many surprises, lots of aha moments in my travels. I've had very few that were negative. More negative ones in the beginning, probably because in the beginning I was more negative. But very few. The negative stuff got fewer and fewer in between, and I find my life here to be mainly, very positive, full of joy, full of happiness. Everything's great. I'm having fun and a good time. My life is about as good as I could imagine it being, and I enjoy it, and I don't think it could get much better. But however it goes and whatever it does, I think it will always be good, because that's the way I define it as being. Things come in, if things come that are painful or difficult, well, that's good, because that's a challenge. That's something that you have to make the right choices. That takes maybe a little thought or a little more effort. So whatever happens, it gets defined as good, because it's all part of the process of growing up. So even the stuff that's painful, even the stuff that may hurt a while, that's good, because there's a good chance that that pain and that hurt has something to do with your fear and ego. So embrace it, learn from it, grow beyond it, and keep going. So the game is really a fun game to play. It's always interesting, and there's lots of change, never gets boring. So my life in all of my realities is pretty much like that. And when I'm in other reality systems, it's pretty much like that too, because they're all the same, in the sense that in every reality you have choices to make, and then you grow up from the feedback you get from those choices, whether they're good choices or not. So it's I think all of my realities are a lot of fun and mostly joy, and I do learn a lot still. As time goes on, I haven't got to the point which, it's all same old, same old. I've been there, done that, haven't learned anything. I'm constantly learning new things. It's just the way life is. You're constantly growing. You just do it at kind of different levels and in different ways.
What about surprise, Tom? There is a story you tell of something that you was told when you was a young person. So were you surprised when Pamela the One turned up in your life when she did?
Well, not surprised, but elated, yes. Yeah, I didn't say, "Oh, about time." It takes a while before you register really what's going on. And then after you get the resonance and things work out, and then it all kind of comes back into memory. Oh, right, this must be the one. Then you say, "About time." But yeah, I've had a lot of surprises. One of the big surprises I had was, I'm starting this out. I shouldn't say I started it out when I was 5, 6, 7 years old, but when I regained my ability to get around in the non-physical and so on, after connecting with Bob Monroe and so on, I'm starting there as a physicist, as a scientist, and in my mind, if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist, or it's not important. You see, back I was in graduate school before I took the first TM course. So my idea about religion was that it was, for people who, need that sort of thing. It was a kind of emotional crutch, and I had a very negative attitude toward most religions and most spiritual things. Thought it was mostly nonsense, because it just didn't seem to make sense to a left-brain physicist. But then the more I learned about life and reality and how things work, I eventually came to the point where I realized that most all of the fundamental things in those religions were all true. And they were all very fundamental ways that the world works. It is all about love and caring and about cooperation. And those are the key ideas. It's about giving. And that was a big surprise for me after all those years of being the agnostic, atheist scientist. I realized that the spiritual side of things was really the important side of things. It was a much more important and fundamental side of things than was the technical or the physical side of things. So that was a big change, going from kind of one extreme, not to the other. I guess I embrace all of it now. I guess I'm extreme always, in all directions. Extremely right-brained, extremely left-brained, extremely into the understanding the science and the physical world as a physicist, and also into the spiritual world. So I may be an extremist in all directions at this point. which maybe makes me not an extremist at all. I'm not sure, but yes, I've had many surprises, things I had to unlearn and things I had to see from a different perspective, just because that's what my experience began to tell me. And all of this was done through my own explorations and understanding of what those explorations meant. So I've gone through a whole bunch of aha moments. Matter of fact, I had a talk with Blue Sky Symposium. You can look that up, I think. And it was an interview where they asked me, what were your main learning points? What were your aha moments as you've gone through, the last 40 years? And I listed 15 of them, 15 kind of aha moments that I got to that were big realizations. And that's out on a video someplace. You can look that up, but that was one of them.
All right, Tom, thank you for sharing that. We are going to go back to Vanessa now, who is going to expand on what Amber was asking you about. Vanessa.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, well, just looking at relationships and how they tie into emotions. So I've heard you, Tom, say that sadness is just an aspect of love, right?
Sadness can be, doesn't have to be, but it can be an aspect of love. Okay. And then usually you get to the sadness where there's people you love, people you care about, and you see that they are hurting themselves. You see that they are dysfunctional and there isn't anything you can do about it. And that's sad, you see. So whether that's, a mother looking at her children, or whether that's, a husband looking at his wife or his children or his mother or his father or whatever, you see people, sometimes I've run into people who have parents that fight all the time. And you kind of wish you see where they are, they would love it if their parents would stop the constant bickering and fighting with each other, but they can't fix it. They can't do anything about it. They just have to accept it. And though they love their parents, that's sad when you love somebody that continues to hurt themselves and be dysfunctional, and you just have to watch them doing it and can't do anything about it. So love can have a component of sadness in it, where if you didn't love them, you might still be a little sad, but it wouldn't be as deep or as painful.
I see. Okay. So the sadness can be an aspect of love when it's about other, when you have this kind of empathy for other. That's when it's sadness. Okay. Because I'm trying to understand emotions all the time. And if I'm feeling sadness, then sometimes I'll give it space to be, because I feel like it's just an aspect of love. But then if I go into it, I see that the sadness is arising because I just have a limited perspective and I'm only seeing it from my view. So then what my intent is to not feel sad and to see a bigger picture perspective of everything, have this bigger understanding. So yes. Would you say, yeah, that's a helpful strategy?
Yes, that is a very helpful way to look at it. And that is the thing that, alleviates that sadness mostly. And that is that that people are just who they are. They have to be who they are. They cannot be any different than they are. So here there's a person, and that person's dysfunctional, and you have to realize that, well, that's just where they are in their process of learning. They're on a path to grow up and learn, and they're struggling. They're struggling with their fear. They're struggling with their ego. They're struggling with their beliefs, and that's just something they have to get through in order to get out the other side. And they may not get out the other side in this lifetime. They may struggle, right up until they die here with those things and never get outside of that. And the next time when they incarnate again, they'll still have to grow up. They'll struggle again. And they may be several lifetimes. They may just struggle on that same issue, but eventually they will grow up and they'll get over it. But you have to let people do that in their own time, in their own way. You can't fix anybody else. All you can do is give them an environment in which they're more likely to fix themselves. So yes, that idea when you see people and you see them being dysfunctional, and you just have to let them be and say, well, that's just the way it is. It's just the way they are. They have to deal with that. I can try to make sure I don't contribute to it by making them more fearful or more upset, or make them retreat into their ego even further, or give them new beliefs to mess them up. So you can try not to be part of their problem, but there often isn't anything you can do to fix it. And that's where empathy comes in. So you have a lot of empathy for the person. So people who aren't nice people, let's say, they do have a lot of anger and whatever, you can step back from a bigger picture and have empathy for those people. They're struggling. They're doing the best they can with what they've got to work with. And there's no way that they can leap out of that, that hole that they have themselves in. They have to climb out on their own. So you make it easy for them. You don't push their buttons on purpose. You don't make fun of them. Maybe you leave them alone and they'll just have to figure it out some way on their own. But you'll have empathy. You'll have compassion for them. You won't feel, get away, you awful person. You won't make judgments about them. You're just not nice. You will have empathy. You'll have compassion, because they're suffering. They're unhappy. They're miserable, but they just don't see that they're making themselves miserable. They think everybody else is making them miserable, but that's not the case. They're making themselves miserable, and there's no way you can get that idea in their head. So that is sad, and that should bring out a feeling of compassion instead of a feeling of contempt. If your feeling is contempt, look at that awful jerk, look at those awful people, then you become part of their problem. You help them dig deeper into that hole that they're in. So that's the thing. The best you can do is just be compassionate with people like that. Everybody here is doing the best they can with what they got to work with. And you say, well, why don't they just grow up? Well, that's not easy to do. And what they have to work with isn't enough to do that quickly. That's just the way it is. Maybe next time, or the time after that, or the time after that, they'll get it. Right now, they don't seem to be getting it. But if you are nice to them anyway, you don't push their buttons, you don't judge them, you just have compassion for them and see if you can be part of their solution rather than part of their problem, then you're doing as much as you can. But you sometimes you just can't do much. You have to accept it, that that's the way they are. But you see, even that takes a lot of the pressure off. If you accept somebody who's like that, that's just the way they are, then you don't get caught in their dysfunction. If they make you angry, you say, oh, that person's like that. That makes me angry. Look at the way they're treating me or somebody else that I care. Now you've been pulled in to their dysfunction, you see, and now you're sharing it. And you're a part of the dysfunction, and you're just being dysfunctional as well. But if you don't get sucked in to that, you don't judge, you don't get negative, and you just have empathy and compassion for them, then they really can't upset you, even if they're rude to you.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of where I was going, is like, say you're in a relationship with somebody and they do things that that are maybe hurtful, like, I don't know, like they don't respond to you, or or they are just kind of disrespectful in a sense. Then if there's a sad feeling that comes up around that, um I think I just guess want to know that I'm going the right direction here, is that if a sad feeling comes up around that, it's my intent is like, don't feel sad. You don't need to feel sad, because that's their decision to do what they're doing, and it means nothing about me.
Right. And it's also, Vanessa, it's also your interpretation of what they're feeling and what they're doing. And your interpretation may not be right. You see?
Yeah.
You're interpreting it as, oh, they're being, what did you say?
Disrespectful. Yeah.
Thoughtless or disrespectful. In their mind, they may not feel that way. They may feel that they've just made a statement about the weather or something, and there's nothing disrespectful about it, and they don't understand that from their point of view. There is no disrespect, but from your point of view, there is. That happens a lot. You have to understand, you interpret. So the thing to do, instead of feeling hurt by it, would be to explore it. Well, just exactly, what's the context of that? Or how did you mean that? Or does that mean this or does that mean that? And explore it in a non-judgmental, non-emotional, non-self-centered way. That's just a topic to explore and see what was going on there. And you may find that a lot of those times that disrespect really wasn't intended. That was just your interpretation. So that's another angle from which you can work.
Right. So just be curious and don't take things personally. Yeah.
Yes. See, as long as you see that everybody's just doing the best they can with what they have to work with, there's no reason to take anything personally. That's just the way they are. There's nothing personal. Even if they're angry with you, it's nothing really personal. It's just the way they are. It's their choice to be angry. You see?
Yeah. So there is the reason that so for me, if I'm taking something personally, is that just because it's my fear, like my fear that's making me make it all about me? And what's that fear?
Yeah,
Fear of,
that's your ego. How dare you say that to me? Why are you being rude to me? Why are you, doing this to me? What have I done to deserve this kind of whatever? You see, that's your ego. It's about you. What about me? What you're doing to me? I don't like that. So it's a me, I, and that's the problem. That is your ego, and that ego is attached to a fear. A fear is that this person isn't the one I thought he was. This person is, is not caring or doesn't really, fit with match, what I thought I had there in that relationship. And you have fears about things not being the way you want them. Well, that's more ego, things being the way you want them. So that's a fear and ego issue. Yeah, you shouldn't take things personally. You have to realize that everybody's different and everybody lives in a different reality. And the reality of the person that you're speaking to is not the same as your reality. So everybody interprets what other people say in terms of their own reality. So you say something to me, I think, what would I mean if I said that? So I'm interpreting what you say in terms of my own understanding of things, you see? And I may miss it because you're not me. So the idea, that's how everybody interprets things. If I said, whatever it is that sound disrespectful, if I said that, I would be disrespectful. That would be a disrespectful thing. I'd only say that if I didn't really care that much about somebody or if I didn't really respect them. Otherwise, I wouldn't say that. So to you, it's disrespectful. To that person, not necessarily. You judge everybody else by interpreting them as yourself, really.
right. So, and I see that you don't do that at all. So is what you're doing, are you connecting with their IUOC to see what they actually mean when they say something? Like, how do you overcome that?
Well, sometimes I do. Sometimes if I'm talking with people or even if I'm lecturing and I'm talking to a whole crowd, I'll connect with the individual who asked me a question to try to find out what's the real question, not the one that they're saying. Because a lot of times, particularly if they have to state the question in public, they're not really telling you what the real question is. So I try to understand, what is the real question and what is the issue and how can I best help them deal with that issue or understand that issue. So, and if I'm talking one-to-one to people, mostly if it's just conversation, I don't bother with doing any of that. I'm not always looking into people's thoughts and how they feel. But if it's a conversation that is, it requires some understanding from their viewpoint, and I don't feel necessarily confident that I've got that, then yes, I can go see life through their eyes, which basically see it how they are seeing it. And I can't do that perfectly, but I can do that to some degree of looking at how they see the world, trying to look through their eyes. But it takes a little time, and you have to know somebody a little bit before you really can do that very well. It's hard to do that just with a person that you've just met. But yes, you can get some sense.
Would you recommend that for others? Because that sounds like an amazing way to communicate with people, is to connect with them and actually see where they're coming from. So is that yeah?
It just happens. The more you care about other people, the more you have compassion for other people, the more that it's about other people, the more you understand where they're coming from, the more you can see the world through them. So as you grow up and make it not about you, oh, that was an insult to me, that didn't feel good, and that then turns out to be a negative. Before that happens, if you care about that other person a lot, and you have developed your ability to love and give, then you will know. You just know. It's an intuitive thing of where that person's coming from. And you don't really pay attention a whole lot necessarily to the words they say, because you're reading between the words. Right. You're not really, the words aren't the main thing. They'll say all sorts of things that they really don't mean, but that's okay, because you understand what they do mean, because you understand them and you can see things through their reality. So it's just not something you have to learn to do. It's something that just becomes a part of you as you grow up.
Okay. Okay, beautiful. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Vanessa. You and your group made a very big contribution to the MBT From Head to Toe event in Vancouver this past summer. I know Tom enjoyed the format, so we are going to be doing it again in 2019, this time in the United Kingdom, Manchester, England, March 3rd, March 4th. 6 immersives, MBT immersives planned in 2018, 3 for Europe, 3 for USA, all sold out. But more immersives in 2019 on the way. Please email us, Keith at MBT Events, for details. Tom, you are also going to be going back to Vancouver for Vanessa's group sometime next summer. And there is also a possible science symposium in Poland to fit in. So that's going to be very exciting. And 2018 is going to be a very busy year. Okay, back to the questions. We're going to go to a slightly darker place for the next couple. Nessie is asking about negative entities. She says, Tom, throughout history, there seems to have been a prevalence of fear attached to the belief that we are imminently vulnerable to attack by negative entities, be it devils, demons, witches, the evil eye, or within MBT speak, NPMR negative entities. Could you discuss the likelihood of this type of interaction in terms of ballpark figures or percentages? Thank you.
Most of the time, these demons and negative entities that attack people are their own fears. Most of the time. Probably, 98% of the time, when you're dealing with negative entities, you're really dealing with your own fear that you interpret in terms of something outside of you, because none of us like to think a thought that the negativity is coming from inside of us. So when we run into negative things, we tend to interpret that as something from outside, which makes an attack, and now we're the victim rather than the perpetrator. Whereas if we realize that it's really likely to be our own fear, then we're actually the perpetrator, not the victim. Or I guess we're both. We're the perpetrator and the victim. So it's most of the time that is what it is. It's your own fear that's being dealt with. Now, sometimes if you're within a group, there is such thing as group consciousness. We often call that culture. There's a group consciousness that shares things. And if that group is very fearful, then you can pick that up. So it's not necessarily all just your own fear, but it comes from the fear of the people that are in your group, your associations, your religion, your workspace, your family, whatever. We're all members of a lot of different groups. You're a member of any group that you, in your mind and with your intent, you associate yourself as being part of that group. You make that association, then you kind of plug into the group mind there. So the fear can come from that. So that's what we call hysteria sometimes, and that a mob becomes more and more angry than any one of the people in the mob would have been by themselves. They reinforce each other's negativity. That's the groupthink. So it can come from that. If you're talking to people and in your culture, there's demons that will, do this to you and that, and there's, spirits of the trees and of the frogs and, the sun and the moon and whatever else, and they do this and that. If that's part of your culture, then you will have those experiences because you will create that kind of experience and you will interpret the experiences you have in terms of that kind of those kind of metaphors. So that's what most of that negativity is. Now, occasionally, the negativity is from somebody who's embodied, somebody who really sending a lot of negative thoughts your way, somebody who has very negative attitudes towards you, or who maybe if they don't have negative attitudes toward you, they just want to hurt you. They just want to do something to you, and that person could have a body here just as well. And that is the dark side of, let's say, healing. You can heal somebody with your intent. You can modify the future probability that they are healthier. Well, you can also modify the future probability that they have less health, or that they have pains, or that all the food that they eat tastes bad, or any kind of other negative thing. You can impart that kind of energy, and it modifies future probability that will happen that way. So if there's somebody who has a very negative attitude towards you, that will tend to make you feel less happy and free. That'll be a burden for you. So we can also have other IUOCs that are not embodied here. That then you would say these are non-physical beings, and they can on occasion cause some distress with some people sometimes, and usually there is a good reason for that. There's some connection, and the connection may not be this lifetime, it may be a lifetime before this. There can be those kinds of things, but now we're talking about stuff that's rare. Now we're way off in the margins about things that happen very infrequently. Maybe 1 in 100,000 people or something, real low in the percentages that this happens to. But there's lots of times where people feel like they're beset by negative entities. It's their own fear, or it's somebody that's in a body who is trying to send a little negative energy their way, as opposed to sending positive energy their way. It could be either one. But fear and anxiety can create all kinds of physical sensations, all kinds of issues, all kinds of things that you hear, voices, pain in your back or in your leg or in your foot. It can create lots and lots of physical issues. That's your own fear can do that. And as you interpret it in terms of another being attacking you, well, you can feel whatever would be appropriate to feel for that attack. The mind leads, the body follows. So if in your mind you interpret your fears in terms of somebody hitting you with a stick, then you may actually feel that you're being hit with a stick. It may even raise welts where it hits you. You may have red spots from where that stick hits you. But all of this is likely to be your own fear and your own interpretation. Though it is possible out in the margins that it's outside of you. If it's outside of you, then it's most likely that it's some other person that has a pretty negative attitude towards you, just sending you bad stuff, and you're getting that negative energy and internalizing it in some way that makes you unhappy or hurts or brings welts on your body or something. And then lastly, the least likely thing is there actually is some non-physical entity giving you a hard time. That is a possibility, but it's pretty remote. It doesn't happen that often. It's probably just less than 5% of the complaints actually have to do with non-physical entities that are giving you a hard time. Most of the rest falls in those other two categories. So it's not impossible. Almost anything's possible in a virtual reality, but it's not something to worry about. Now, what can you do about it? For all of these, what you can do about it is if you don't have any fear, if you don't have a connection to this external being that is causing you trouble, whether they're in or out of a body, whether they're in or out of this virtual reality, if there's no fear there, then they cannot connect to you. Only if you are engaged in some way with them, only if that person that really dislikes you is somebody you really dislike. You see, now through that mutual dislike, there's a conduit in which they can interact with you. If you don't have that dislike and you don't have fear in that situation, then you're pretty much invulnerable. So fear is the problem. Same with the disembodied being isn't going to influence you or cause you problem if there's no fear. If you have this fear of, oh, some disembodied being is going to get me, the ghouls that wander around at night on Halloween, they're going to get me, then you're likely to have to interpret things of those things getting you, and you'll feel that way, which will make you more afraid. And as you get more and more afraid of it, it's more likely to happen. And it's easier for any entity to actually modify or do things to you that are negative. That's why in all of these voodoo kind of practices where somebody goes to hurt somebody, the very first thing they do is try to frighten them. That's what the little doll's for, right? That's what the little doll with the pins in it. There's nothing magic about the little doll other than it's supposed to scare you. And once you're frightened, now there's the doorway. You've just created a big door by which they can, move their intent energy towards you. So if you have no fear, then you don't have a problem. You're pretty much invulnerable. If you do have a fear, that fear creates your vulnerability, but it's a very small vulnerability. Now, when it's you yourself and it's your own fear that's creating the problem, then obviously there is a doorway there by that fear can interfere with you because it's inside of you to begin with. That's the worst one. So fear is the problem. And if you're a fearless person and a person of love and caring, there probably isn't anybody that dislikes you. Most everybody likes you because you're really a very likable person. So you don't have that problem either. Fear is the biggest problem here as far as the being gotten from elsewhere, whether it's yourself or someplace else. Fear is the doorway through which all of this takes place. That's why step one is always get rid of your fear.